I survived the worst, and you can too. A story of overcoming and starting over. It took me a long time to tell this story, not because I didn't know what to say, but because each word carried a weight I was still learning to bear. My name is Carlos. I'm 25 today, but what I'm about to tell happened when I was 15. At the time, I lived with my mother, Isabel, and my stepfather, Marcelo, in a middle-class neighborhood in the north of the city. My mother was a nurse, on call, the kind who lives for her job, and Marcelo was an army veteran, decorated, respected, and admired by almost everyone who knew him. Behind the facade of discipline and honor lay a cold, controlling, and cruel man. I grew up hearing that discipline builds character, that pain educates, and that respect is earned, not earned. For years I thought this was normal. I was just a strict father, they said. But I wasn't. I was something else. And it was only when my body began to give way that I realized that if I didn't fight for myself, no one else would. Before Marcelo, my life was simple. My biological parents separated when I was 6. My father disappeared, and for many years, I was raised by my mother alone. We were poor, but happy in our own way. My mother did everything she could to provide me with every comfort, and I never complained. She met Marcelo when I was 10. He was much older, very proper, the kind who asserts himself through his presence. At the time, I liked him. He called me my warrior, took me for walks in the park, taught me how to tie a rope. At first it seemed nice, but everything started to change when he came to live with us. He had rules, many, and each one came with a veiled threat. If I didn't obey, I would pay the price. First came the yelling, then came the physical punishment, and then the sleep deprivation, the schedule control, the constant humiliation. And my mother, she saw it, she knew, but she preferred to write in her medical notebooks than face the truth. My routine with Marcelo was insane. He woke me up every day at 4 a.m. with a flashlight in my face, ordering me to run around the block. He told me I was getting soft, lazy, that I needed to get a grip. While his sons, Tiago and Lucas, slept peacefully, I spent the night scrubbing the living room floor or doing squats until my legs gave out. If I cried, I got beaten. If I complained, I went without food. I went to school almost falling asleep standing up. I started getting poor grades and lost interest in everything. Some teachers tried to understand what was happening, but Marcelo was cunning. He knew how to manipulate people. When the school called, he acted like a worried father with a rebellious boy. And my mother, she said she was doing her best, that she needed to work, that she couldn't lose her job. I understood, but that didn't lessen the pain of seeing her turn her face away when I needed her most. With each sleepless night, I died a little inside. There was one time I pretended to be sick just to get a few more hours of sleep. Marcelo poured a bucket of ice water over me and yelled that I wasn't a man. A man faces pain, not runs from it. When I tried to respond, I got a slap so hard my ears rang for 3 days. Still, no one did anything. On the street, he was former Sergeant Marcelo, a national hero. At home, he was a tyrant. I started writing down everything that happened. I'd grab an old notebook and secretly write down in pencil all the humiliations, the punishments, the words. I also started secretly recording audio with the cell phone my uncle Jorge had given me for Christmas. Jorge was my mother's younger brother and had always been my refuge. He was a history teacher and lived in a simple studio apartment, but he treated me like a person. When he realized something was wrong, he started showing up more, asking questions, trying to help me. But his presence bothered Marcelo, who began pressuring him at work, using his connections to create problems. That's when things got even uglier. Jorge worked as a pedagogical coordinator at a private school. It wasn't a high-ranking position, but it provided stability. When Marcelo found out where he worked, he made a point of calling the administration, saying that Jorge was negatively influencing an unstable and lying boy. He used his image as a concerned father to tarnish Jorge's reputation. Soon, Jorge was called to a conduct meeting, and even without evidence against him, he began to be viewed with suspicion. His family began pressuring him to step aside. They said he was causing trouble, turning Isabel against her husband, but he didn't give up on me, and that's why Nusa entered the picture. She was Jorge's girlfriend, a criminal lawyer. When she learned what I was going through, she offered to help, quietly. She began visiting the house under the pretext of visiting her sister-in-law, but she carried a hidden recorder and a watchful eye. Little by little, she gathered evidence. Every sentence Marcelo said, every threat, every moment of abuse was saved on a flash drive hidden inside a rice bowl in the kitchen cupboard. Even with this support, I was at my limit. My mental health was deteriorating rapidly. I had anxiety attacks, severe insomnia, and constant destructive thoughts. I felt trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Sometimes I'd stare at the mirror and wonder who that skinny, sunken-eyed boy was, who trembled at the mere sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway. I began to fear the night, fear the silence. I was afraid to sleep because I knew he would come at 4 a.m. I began to think about disappearing, vanishing. No one would notice. No one would care. I almost gave up. One night, I climbed onto the roof of the building where we lived. I stood there, staring into space. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stayed. And I might have jumped if it weren't for a note I found in my pants pocket that morning, written by Jorge. It said, "You are strong. They won't break you. Hold on just a little longer." Those words held me together. It wasn't a miracle. It was love. Real, silent, saving love. After that day on the roof, something changed inside me. I was still broken inside, but I began to see the situation more clearly. I decided to fight. With Nusa's help, I took the recordings to Child Protective Services. But Marcelo had already planted his version of the story in the neighborhood. He said I was problematic, that I made things up to get attention. Even his sons, Tiago and Lucas, were forced to repeat the same narrative. I could see the fear in their eyes. They didn't want to lie, but they also didn't want to be beaten. When I was called for an interview with a social worker, she looked at me suspiciously. She asked questions as if I was exaggerating, as if I were to blame for bothering an exemplary man. I left worse off than when I arrived. But I didn't give up. I started recording everything more accurately. Photos, videos, screenshots of messages. I began to reveal the truth. Over time, even some neighbors who had previously defended Marcelo became suspicious. It was at that moment that things began to change. The tension at home became unbearable. Marcelo sensed I was reacting, and this made him more aggressive. He started locking my bedroom door from the outside at night. He said it was for my safety. I knew it was punishment. My mother, she remained distant. When I confronted her, she said she was taking care of me as best she could. That recording the episodes in her notebooks was her way of protecting me, because one day it might serve as evidence. But I just wanted her to say, enough, to take my hand and say, let's get out of here. She never did. And that hurt more than the screams, more than the slaps. The feeling of abandonment by the one who should have loved me above all else was a hole that kept growing. I started running away from home at night. I slept hidden in Jorge's building, sometimes at school, with the help of the school principal who began to listen to me. It was like I was living two lives, that of the broken boy pretending to be okay, and that of the silent warrior collecting evidence. The situation reached the point where my school filed a lawsuit against the juvenile court. A literature teacher, Ms. Marlene, was the one who confronted the administration and demanded that the complaint be filed. She said I entered class pale and trembling, and that it was no longer possible to ignore it. When they called me to testify with a psychologist from the school, this time I was truly heard. I showed the recordings, the notes, everything I could gather. We also handed over my mother's notebooks, which Jorge managed to get one night when she was in the hospital. She had recorded everything, schedules, punishments, symptoms, and yet she had let it all continue. The pain I felt reading those accounts, written with almost clinical coldness, was greater than any slap I had ever received. It scarred me. Justice was brought to justice and Marcelo was summoned, but instead of backing down, he armed himself with his best weapon, his image. He made videos of himself crying, posted photos of a happy family, and began spreading the word online that I was ungrateful, a liar, and a rebel. Public opinion was divided, and the battle became not only legal, but moral. The days leading up to the hearing were the longest of my life. Marcelo appeared in a sharp suit with the Brazilian flag on his chest and a letter signed by a veterans association praising his exemplary conduct as a father. Isabel was summoned, but she tried to remain neutral. She said she could neither affirm nor deny anything with certainty, as if everything she herself had written had been merely a clinical hypothesis. I trembled, but I didn't cry. I sat before the judge, looked him in the eye, and told my story. No embellishments, no shouting, just the truth. Nusa acted as my lawyer. She was firm, direct, courageous. She presented the evidence, the audio recordings, the notebooks, and still, Marcelo secured a plea. They claimed his methods were harsh, but not cruel, that there were different interpretations of the discipline, and that since there were no permanent physical injuries, imprisonment was not warranted. He was forced to stay away from me and temporarily lost joint custody with my mother. That was it. And that day, I understood that justice and truth do not always go together. After the agreement, I moved in with Jorge for a while. He welcomed me as his son. We didn't have much, but there, I managed to sleep through the night for the first time in years. Gradually, I started going back to school and doing therapy with an incredible psychologist named Ana Paula, who helped me name my traumas and reorganize my pain. She taught me that I wasn't to blame, that no child deserves to be molded with suffering. It took me a long time to believe this, but she planted that seed in me. I was afraid of becoming my stepfather, afraid of becoming hard, cold, vengeful. So I immersed myself in my studies. I wrote letters to myself, reclaiming the boy I once was. I wrote poetry, chronicles, and started an anonymous blog telling my story, which soon began receiving comments from others going through similar situations. There, I found a community, and even without knowing it, they also saved me. They made me see that I wasn't a mistake, that surviving was already a kind of victory. Isabel contacted me sometime later. She wanted to start over, she said. She said she was afraid of Marcelo, that he was a coward, that she thought writing everything down was enough, and that one day I would understand. I listened, but I couldn't forgive right away. How do you forgive someone who watched your pain and chose to do nothing? It was a long process. First, I agreed to talk. Then I accepted a hug, and only much. Later was I able to look at her without feeling angry. I understood that she was also a hostage, not only to him, but to fear, loneliness, and guilt. I don't justify it, but I understand, and understanding this freed me. I stopped carrying the burden of wanting her to be different. I accepted that she did what she could with the tools she had. Today, we talk sometimes, at a distance, with care, but without hate. That for me is already a form of healing. The family that hurts you isn't always the same one that will heal you, and that's okay. We rebuild ourselves in other places, in other arms. At 18, I entered college to study psychology. Not because I wanted to understand others, but because I needed to understand myself. Each class was a reopened wound, but also a chance to heal properly. I graduated with honors, and today I work with young victims of domestic violence. I listen to their stories with the same respect I wish I had received. I tell them they are not alone, that their voices matter, that resistance is beautiful, but surviving with dignity is even more beautiful. Sometimes I catch myself remembering Carlos at 15, thin, tired, with dark circles under his eyes and broken dreams. I wish I could hug him and say, "You can do it. It will hurt, but it will pass. I still have scars. I still have nightmares. But I also have courage. I have a voice, and no one can take that away from me. If I tell my story today, it's so others know that you don't have to be a hero to survive. All it takes is a spark, a note in your pocket, an outstretched hand, and the decision to keep going. I've made peace with my past, but I haven't forgotten it. It's part of me. It shaped me, not the way Marcelo wanted, but the way I chose. I first told this story in an online group for abuse survivors, and I was surprised by how many people recognize themselves in it. Pain can be lonely, but it's never unique. Everyone carries their own version, their own battle, their own scar. And I learned that speaking out is a political act, that breaking the silence is challenging the system. Today, I continue writing, no longer hidden, not even in pencil. I write books, articles, and also letters to at-risk teenagers. I've been invited to give lectures and given interviews for a documentary about invisible violence. I never sought fame. I just wanted no one else to go through what I went through in silence. And if one person is saved by hearing my story, it was worth it. Because every story told is a cry of resistance, and every cry heard can be the difference between life and death. If you've made it this far, thank you. I truly do. I don't know what your pain is, but I know it matters. And if you're going through something similar, I want to tell you that there is a way out. It's not always easy, it's not always quick, but it exists. Sometimes it starts with a note in your pocket, sometimes with an anonymous blog, sometimes with a simple, "Help me." Don't be silent. Don't accept violence as normal. You're not exaggerating, you're not weak, you're resisting, and that in itself is an act of strength. I'm Carlos, and for a long time I was just a boy screaming in silence. Today I'm a man who learned to transform pain into a bridge, who chose not to repeat the cycle, who decided to live truthfully. And I hope my story, with all its failures and victories, can serve as a refuge for you too. Because in the end, survivors are not eternal victims, they are silent. Warriors who learned to love even after war. The reconstruction wasn't linear. I had relapses, days when everything seemed to come back, when a simple noise would throw me back into that dark room where I'd wash the floor while others slept. But little by little, I began to recognize my triggers. Therapy was essential in this process. Ana Paula taught me to listen to my body, to respect its signals. I learned that my anger was justified, that my fear wasn't weakness. I did breathing exercises, kept emotional journals, and most importantly, I began to surround myself with people who truly saw me, not as the boy who went through it, but as Carlos, the human being. I began to allow others to love me. At first it was strange to accept affection and care. I felt guilty, as if I didn't deserve it. But little by little I learned to receive it, to receive a hug without shrinking, to receive a compliment without looking away, to receive love without thinking it was a trap. This, for me, was one of the biggest steps in my healing, believing I was worthy of love, even after everything. Understanding what true love is also made me see what it never was. Marcelo said he did it for love, that he wanted to make me a man, that I needed to learn the hard way. But love isn't like that. Love doesn't break you and then try to build you up the way it wants. Love builds with patience, with presence, with listening. And my mother, for a long time, I mistook her inaction for abandonment. Today, I see it was fear, a flawed form of protection. She thought that by recording everything in her notebooks, she was building an escape route. But writing things down wasn't enough. She had to act. And even so, I decided not to let it consume me. I made peace with the idea that she loved me the way she knew how, that it wasn't enough, but it was all she had. It was my choice not to let the hurt be bigger than me. Because anger, when fed too much, also becomes a prison. And I had already spent too much time trapped. During college, I interned at a shelter for vulnerable teenagers. There, I met boys like me, some with even tougher stories, others who didn't even know where to begin. I remember a boy, Vinicius, 14, who looked me in the eye and said, "Have you ever been afraid to sleep?" I didn't respond with words. I just held his hand. Sometimes that's what we need, to be seen, to be acknowledged in our pain. It doesn't always have to be answered, just presence. And in that moment I realized that my past, however cruel it may have been, could be a bridge. It could serve to help others not feel so alone. I couldn't change what I experienced, but I could transform its meaning, give purpose to the pain. And that's what motivated me to continue studying, to specialize. Today, I'm a clinical psychologist, but before that, I was a survivor. And I carry that with pride, not shame. Returning to the house where it all happened was one of the most challenging experiences of my life. Marcelo no longer lives there after Isabel separated for good. I went with Jorge after years of not even passing by the street. The building seemed smaller, the gate lower, but the memory was immense. I climbed the stairs like someone walking through a bad dream. Every corner held a memory. The bathroom door where I hit my head once. The window I looked at, hoping to see the sunrise before being called for another punishment. The hallway where I heard screams for the first time. But that day, I didn't cry. I entered the room where I slept, took a deep breath and let it all come. The fear, the anger, the sadness. And for the first time, I didn't run away. I just stood there, firm, seeing that space for what it was, just an empty room. The pain lived within me, not in the walls. And there I realized I had won. Not Marcelo, not the system, but the darkness it tried to plant within me. Tiago and Lucas, Marcelo's biological sons, contacted me years later. Life was hard for them too. Tiago got involved with drugs. Lucas suffered from severe depression. Both were forced to follow a father who instilled fear. When we met again, it was strange, tense. But over time, we were able to talk. I discovered that they too carried wounds, that they too had been victims in a different way. Violence, even when it doesn't directly affect us, leaves its mark on those who witness it. We gradually made peace. Today, we keep in touch. We laugh, we reminisce about our childhood, we talk about the good things we managed to keep. Yes, there were good times. A family pizza, an afternoon in the park, a soccer game on TV. I don't deny those memories. They existed too, but they don't justify the horror. They serve as a reminder that life is complex, that even in the worst stories, there are glimmers of light. And it's in them that we need to cling to keep going. Jorge remains my safe haven. He and Nusa got married and had a daughter, my goddaughter. It's in her that I see the childhood I wish I'd had. A free, loved, respected child. I play with her, tell her stories, teach her to name her feelings. When she cries, no one tells her to shut up. When she's afraid, someone holds her hand. This, for me, is revolution. It's breaking the cycle, and I know I'm doing this too with every young person I meet, with every talk I give. I always end my talks by saying, I didn't survive alone. I had hands that pulled me up from the depths, and today, if I can, I want to be that hand for someone, because deep down, that's what changes the world. Connections, looks that say, I see you. Silences that welcome, cries that liberate, and stories that are told, not to impress, but to heal. Telling my story healed me, and maybe in some way it will heal someone else too. One of the final steps in my healing was writing a letter to Marcelo. I never delivered it, but I wrote it. I said everything I needed to, that he broke me inside, that he made me doubt who I was, that he almost slowly killed me. But I also wrote that he didn't defeat me, that today I sleep in peace, that I've built a dignified, honest life full of love, everything he tried to erase. I said forgiveness wasn't for him, but for me. Because carrying that hatred was like taking poison, hoping it would die, and I didn't want to poison myself anymore. After writing, I burned the letter, and in that smoke I felt a part of the weight dissolve. I never saw him again, and I hope I never will. But I know that wherever he is, he will never have the power he once had. And that is victory enough, my victory. Over time, I returned to the blog, but now under my own name. I published longer texts, some stories from other young people who gave me permission to share. I created a network, a listening space. I named the project Silenced Cry, in honor of that boy who screamed silently at home. Today, this project serves young people from all over the country. We have volunteer psychologists, partner lawyers, social educators. We offer workshops, discussion groups, and legal support. It all started with a hidden notebook and a broken cell phone. And today, it has become something real, something big, something alive. I didn't do it alone, of course, but I was the spark, and that fills me with pride. When I look back, I see not only pain, but purpose. Because sometimes the greatest overcoming is transforming the wound into a tool. I was once asked in an interview, if you could go back in time, would you change your story? I thought long and hard before answering. Of course, I would have loved to grow up in a peaceful home with affection and a peaceful sleep. But if I erased my story, I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't have helped those I helped. I wouldn't have met those I met. I wouldn't have the sensitivity I have today. So I answered, I wouldn't change my story, but I would change the system that allowed it to happen. Because the problem isn't just the aggressor. It's everything that protects them. It's the school that remains silent. It's the neighbor who pretends not to see. It's the relative who minimizes. It's the state that turns a blind eye. And that's why I keep fighting. Because my story had a way out, but many are still trapped. And every cry I make today is for those who still haven't been able to speak out. At 25, I can say I feel whole. Not unharmed, not perfect, but whole. I've learned that being whole means accepting your broken parts. It's looking at the scar and knowing it was once an open wound, but now it's skin that has survived. I have loyal friends, a job I love, a home I've built with care. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still wake up with a start when I hear footsteps in the hallway. But now I know how to breathe. I know how to embrace myself. I've learned to be my own shelter, and that's liberating. I no longer wait for others to save me. Now I save myself. And that gives me a strength I never imagined I had. The pain that accompanied me for so long is now just a part of me. It doesn't define me. It shaped me, but it doesn't limit me. And that's what I wish for everyone who's been through what I've been through, that one day the pain will become just a part, and that the rest will be life. Today, when I look in the mirror, I no longer see the frightened boy I once was. I see a man with scars, yes, but with a sparkle in his eyes. A man who learned not to be ashamed of having cried, of having screamed, of having almost given up, because that's exactly what made me human. And being human, complete with light and shadow, is the greatest form of resilience I know. I allow myself to fail. I allow myself to rest. I allow myself to live. I've learned that I don't need to be strong all the time, that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's pure courage. Life still brings challenges, as it does for everyone. But now I know how to protect myself. I know how to say no. I know how to recognize the signs of abuse, of manipulation, and I teach this to those around me, because if I could transform my personal hell into a beacon for others, then all the pain had meaning, and there is no greater victory than this, having survived and chosen to flourish. To every young person who comes into my office and says, "I can't take it anymore," I smile respectfully and say, "I've been there, and I'm here now. You can do it too." I don't say this as a magical promise, but as a testimony, because the path to overcoming is neither straight nor quick. It's full of setbacks, of cloudy days, but it's possible. It always is. The strength we need is often dormant, stifled, but with acceptance, with a safe space, it awakens. And when it awakens, no one can extinguish it. That's why I keep going. Because I know that every story heard, every pain shared, is an opportunity to break the cycle, to take one more step toward a society less blind, less deaf, less complicit. And that motivates me every day. Sometimes I still go back to my old notebooks, the ones I started writing down everything in when I was still a teenager, afraid of everything. I read my shaky words, the drawings I made on the edges to disguise the pain, the mental maps trying to understand what was happening, and then I closed the notebook and sigh. That boy resisted. He survived. And today he is me. Sometimes I wonder what he would think when he saw where we've come. I think he would smile, a shy, tired smile, but full of pride, because no one bet on us, but we won. And that's no small feat. Sometimes the greatest miracle in life isn't coming out unscathed. It's coming out alive, with a beating heart, with new dreams, with the courage to love again. It's curious how, even after so much pain, I still believe in love. Not the love that controls, that demands, that hurts, but the love that listens, that cares, that remains even when everything falls apart. I found this love in the friendships I cultivated, in the family I chose, in the patients who confide their stories to me. Perhaps one day I'll find this love in someone to share my life with, but I'm in no rush, because today I am enough, whole, complete. The boy who once slept in fear now dreams of hope. And that for me is the greatest sign that it was all worth it, even if it hurt, even if it bled. I choose to live, and live truthfully. If you've read this far, I thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me tell this story that for so long I carried in silence. I hope in some way it touched something within you, that it reminded you of your strength, that it gave you a breath of hope, because we don't have to be perfect to start over. Just be alive. Just want to. And if I could do it, you can too. My name is Carlos. I was a victim. I was a survivor. And today I am much more than that. I am living proof that it is possible to transform pain into light, that it is possible to break the cycle, that it is possible to be free, and that despite everything, it is still worth believing in tomorrow.